Welcome everyone to this Connecting Africa video interview. I'm Paula Gilbert, the editor of Connecting Africa, and today I'm joined by Lorna Hardie, who is the Senior Director for Sub-Saharan Africa at VMware. And today we are talking about emerging hybrid work trends and the impact on women in the workplace. So welcome, Lorna. It's so nice to chat to you.
You too. Nice to see you again, Paula.
Yeah, so I'm quite interested in what you think about, how work trends have kind of evolved in the past few years and what the status of hybrid work is in 2023.
Yeah, so that's quite an interesting topic, and one that is especially high on the agenda for many executives out there at the moment. What is the new normal? What is this hybrid workforce? How do we get the most out of our team? But also, how do we cater for our employees' needs, who are looking for more flexibility and more flexible hybrid work? So, I think at the end of the day, hybrid is going nowhere. It's a hot topic in terms of grappling the mechanics of managing a hybrid team, and something that definitely is coming forward is I'm finding that many executives are looking for ways in which hybrid work is more formalized from an HR context. Perhaps being set in policies, putting policies in place to support it and provide management as well as employees with some kind of guidelines that help them govern their day-to-day engagements.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm also interested in what would you say with this rise of hybrid working that we've seen over the past few years, how has it impacted particularly on women in the workforce, would you say?
So I think hybrid working arguably has provided women a chance to better balance their lives in terms of work-life balance. Perhaps as a mother, a partner, a caretaker, taking a few days in a day in a day for personal matters is far easier when you're not sitting in the office, right? You also tend to be able to kind of catch up on those hours within your own hours and those hours that work for your home, your family, or for your environment. And it's often been a lifeline, I think, for some single mothers, for example, or those who are battling with trying to handle, other priorities and other issues, at home. I guess, in a sense, what we've seen as hybrid work environments have in many ways encouraged more women to put their name in the hat and apply for roles, and roles not necessarily just based in South Africa, but across the globe. Even VMware as a whole has seen an upsurge in female applicants coming through across the globe. But, at the end of the day, I'm not saying it's the answer to everything, but there definitely have been positives for women in the workplace. So that would be my take on it.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. This idea that people can live anywhere and work from somewhere else. And do you think, I just wonder if we went through 2 years of that happening a lot and people being open to it, and whether we're taking a step back, or do you think, people are still viewing it in the same way as they did during the pandemic, or they're wanting to stop the hybrid thing, get people more back in the office?
Yeah, I think it's very role dependent. There's no question that certain roles perhaps don't cater as effectively for hybrid as others, and that's sort of that's sort of been one has to look at manufacturing, and one has to look at sort of those hands-on type roles that require you to be in the workforce, right? But in terms of taking a step back, I mean, I believe that the proof has been there that hybrid can work, and effective use of collaboration tools have been a huge help in terms of that. I mean, we were talking about this online medium of the interview process, but at the end of the day, now the grapple is, okay, so what's the right blend of hybrid? What are the right definitive boundaries? Where do you draw? Where do you enable effective communication? Between your team members in a non-online format, and how do you encourage that? And I mean, I often talk about effective collaboration. Let's not meet in the office potentially for the sake of just a meeting, but let's meet in the office to come and have a cup of coffee. Let's do the water cooler talk. Let's talk about some of the problems that we're facing and see if perhaps I've got a way around it, you've got a way around it, and Pete's sitting down the lane and he's got another way around it. It's more of an engagement rather than a meeting for a meeting, sitting in the office and essentially deemed to have to be in the office because of that.
Yeah. And then what would you say? Obviously, there are a lot of challenges for women in working environments, but what do you think are some key ones that we're still facing, and how tech can sort of help alleviate those?
So, gosh, I mean, let's talk about the obvious in Africa, which is power. At the end of the
Yes.
day, one can't ignore that, and which I guess in many ways for some, having to cater for your employees in terms of providing a place that has effective, power, technology, a digital platform to enable them to communicate effectively is essential, right? At the end of the day, if you look at some of the data that comes through from IDC, they're talking about. A lot of CIOs looking at investing in digital adoption platforms, providing learning tech, creating, platforms for learning technologies to see an increase in productivity. Giving, great, digital platforms giving access to expertise at speed. We spoke about the collaboration tools and how tech really has helped one, us survive what we've had to survive, but also open, as I said, the boundaries of location to many roles, which previously weren't accessible. If you look at some of the ways that tech are helping women in particular in terms of code, a number of African countries are really in it looking at to enabling women in code to expose them and encourage them to embrace the science and maths at a grassroots level, but taking advantage of this new digital medium that will allow them to become, the future employees of choice. I mean, I even have to look at sort of the, outside of technology as VMware, we've seen, we've taken on an approach of a more inclusive model of hiring. We've moved away from
Yeah.
kind of the limited list of qualifications to one around talents, experiences, and skills. And what we found, not only outside of sort of the traditional approach, by doing this, we've seen a rapid increase in the number of applicants and female applicants specifically. Funnily enough, so I think to talk to a few points on that topic. Very passionate
Yeah,
about
no,
that.
that's great to hear. And then I'm interested, what is VMware's strategy for growth in Africa, and how does female leadership play into that in particular?
So, so VMware's strategy for growth in Africa. We've grown as an organisation so much so that even locally we've actually split our business into two key, let's call it sales domains or territories. One is West, East, and Central Africa, and one is South Africa, so that we have the right focus for each of the domains. Because my business runs both West, East, and Central Africa as well as South Africa, so we've actually segmented it so that we can have underneath this sort of leadership, we can now have the right support that's specific for the geopolitical differences that lie in, for example, Nigeria and Kenya versus South Africa, and also industrialization, industry specifications. So from a business standpoint, we've sort of lifted the umbrella of the organization to allow for future growth and to support the emerging and the growing nature of our business, and obviously hiring and specialization in those domains. If I look at talking to the point of female leadership within VMware as a general rule, look, I've personally been in this industry for well over 2 decades, and I've yet to have worked for an organization where there were so many females sitting in senior management roles. I know that in 2022, I believe they spoke of circa 29% of women in the overall workforce. But if I look at my region in particular, in SEMEA, the female representation a year ago was 40% female in my direct comparative line of work. You know, if I look at locally how that translates to locally, I mean we have circa 35-40% of our workforce are female in sub-Saharan Africa in particular, and even if I look at the last sort of 10 hires, I can say comfortably that 65% of those hires were female. So strong drive, strong KPIs, strong approach towards diversity and inclusion inside VMware.
Okay, that's so nice to hear. Um, And maybe you spoke a bit about your career. You've been in this business for a long time, but I'm interested, from your maybe more personal perspective, what has that experience been like, as a woman in the tech industry, and being in a leadership role for a lot of it.
So I have to step back and say, I don't feel there's been a massive difference, right? Maybe because they call me the proverbial terror, right? Not easy to take no for an answer. But I've had amazing men who've played a role in supporting me through my career, right? They've really helped me get to where I am today. They've sort of taught, I'll never forget my first manager who sort of used to say to me, Lorna, don't come to me with problems, come to me with solutions. He really stretched me and made me think out the box in terms of, where to and how to engage. He also taught me, kind of not to limit myself to the glass ceiling of an immediate or the immediate, or go beyond, seek mentorship and advice from outside of just the channels of your traditional team, and as I said, I'm still in touch with many of those coaches along the way, and I guess I've had tremendous diversity in terms of management styles, and also location of my management, from the UAE to Europe to the Americas, which is also, I think, been central to perhaps my career and navigating, let's call it, the challenges that we face on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, and we have seen a positive change, I think, over the last few years, of more women in senior roles, in high profile roles across Africa. But what do you think are the important things that can be done, to try and improve that even more for the continent?
So, and I mean, this is a Lorna kind of, let's call it, view. I think when we see women in executive roles, they perhaps are present, but perhaps not as, they're perhaps a little bit less visible. They want to get the job done, and they want to do it without massive spotlight, for example, on them, because it's often driven by the fact that, outside of the day-to-day requirements of our role, as I said before, we're investing in, we've got a home to run, a family, and or responsibilities that we have to manage at the same time. And when we start looking at networking, which I think is really essentially what we need to be starting to do better, right? And I think that's acknowledged by every female executive out there. We often see that networking time could perhaps be better spent on your other priorities, or balancing the guilt that we feel about investing our time in that. So I guess that's a challenge we all face, and it's one we as leaders can only change, right? And represent to other females coming into the workforce, so that they understand that from a role modeling standpoint, it's not impossible. I mean, I have seen over the last, over COVID, funnily enough, an increase in the number of women in tech roundtables, and maybe the sheer facilitation of having an online platform just fitted better into their diaries, enabled us to connect far more effectively. But I've really seen also, through those roundtables and through those connections that really happened on an online medium in many ways, or accelerated on an online medium, a rise in the female life coach, executive coach type roles, an improvement in collaboration. So without a doubt, that's really what we should be focusing on, is an improvement of collaboration between ourselves, not only around opportunities, but potential, seeking key, looking and recognizing key talents across the industry, and bringing them into the pool, and bringing them into the future. We can really set the example for the future generations, I guess what I'm saying.
Okay, well, thanks so much. I think we're going to have to leave it there, but I think it's on a good note. So thanks so much to Lorna Hardie, the Senior Director for Sub-Saharan Africa at VMware. I really appreciate you sharing your insights and your time with me today.
Thank you, Paula. Much appreciated. Have a great day.